Welcome to another interview with the Vocero Hispano. Jhon Matias became a reverend in 1984, and it's an experience that he has said it has made him passionate about kind of removing some barriers in the educational system, among other issues. He joined the GRPS board on August 5 of 2013, and now his term is currently finalizing in December, the end of December. He is currently seeking re-election, so he's here to speak to us about some of the things that he has experienced in his position right now and what he plans on doing in the upcoming years if he is re-elected. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your time.
It is such a pleasure to be here. I think the last time I was here, I was seeking re-election some 4 years ago. So It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we have you here once again seeking re-election, so I think it's great having you once again.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So I just wanted to speak about your experience as trustee. How have you been connecting with families within, or being part of GRPS board?
Yeah, so in terms of being a board member, being a board trustee, we certainly are elected by the public, and the expectation is that we communicate with our constituents. I've had the privilege of being voted onto the board and then being reelected twice, and now seeking my third term. Generally, people have my phone number, they have email, so they call. When I do visits to schools, often I will meet with family members and concerned citizens about what's going on in our public schools.
Okay, and then specifically with the Hispanic community, how has that connection been within the past few years?
I think within the past few years, typically I will go to some of the meetings in our communities. I've been part of the Latino Coalition early on. I communicate with parents through certainly board meetings, and then conversations that I have when there are issues that they're concerned about. I've had a lot of parents, certainly now through election season, getting in contact with me, concerned about how their schools are going, what different changes they're looking for. So,
what have been some of those issues that they kind of address?
I think that some of the issues that our parents overall, and certainly you probably know that the largest number of families represented in GRPS is the Hispanic constituents. And so it's clear that we need to address some of the issues, certainly the bilingual issue, safety issues that our parents are concerned about. And so those are some of the kinds of things that I still hear from parents even today in regards to some of their concerns. As you know, currently we're looking at facilities, and so we've done a major study where we're using about half of the properties that we currently own, and we have some hard choices to make because some of the schools that we currently have aren't quite filled up to the capacity.
And those buildings that I've seen on various sources as well, that it is possible that some of the buildings could close, but it just depends on what can happen within, the decisions made. How could that impact specifically the Hispanic community? Are those buildings that are located within their neighborhoods?
I think what is interesting is that we're seeing much of the Hispanic representation, if you will, very committed to the education of their children. We see by far, for example, when they have school nights, when grades are coming out, we see the greatest representation among Hispanics parents coming out to find out how their kids are doing in parent night. They typically are helping the schools out, volunteering, if obviously they're stay-at-home persons, and so, but even then they make the time to come to the school nights or come to help out in the school. So we're seeing that parents want and expect that partnership, that when they hand off our kids, and I had 4 kids that went through GRPS, I'm partnering with you, and I expect you to not only to treat my kid fair, but also to educate them. I'm expecting you to teach them some things. And I think some of the struggles that our parents have, especially if their first language is Spanish, is that they don't communicate well in English, if at all. And so that's a barrier. I remember as a kid growing up, I used that against my parents. Because I knew English, I would filter the information to them. And once they became savvy to that, they realized that, wait a minute, you're not telling me the truth. And they went directly to teachers, for example, to find out, how is Johnny doing, John? And those kinds of things. And so sometimes we see that, but the parents do expect teachers to be teaching their children. And often when parents can't help because of perhaps their lack of education, maybe they don't know geometry or algebra and some of those kinds of things, then they need other resources to help to make sure that that skill set is being mastered.
So right now, is there any programs kind of being offered for parents in case they need help helping their students or their children?
We have GRPS University, and so if you go to the web links in GRPS, you see that there are classes that parents can take that teach them about their math. Each school should have ways that parents can find out about how to teach math. For example, math is one of those major areas that I think typically separates families or separates them because if they have a certain level of math mastery. So those kinds of things I think we see, and so the schools ought to have ways. They have tutors that they offer. Certainly, I used to be a KSSN worker, and so it's that partnership of a KSSN community school coordinator with a therapist, and often the coordinator helps bring resources to the school that might help with tutoring in other areas that the school is trying to make happen.
Okay, that's interesting. I think those are great resources being provided. I know there are many parents that probably don't know how to help their students, or there's just conflict sometimes. If that parent doesn't know how to help their child with homework, they just simply they say in Spanish, se quedan en las mismas.
Sí,
they just stay there. So
claro.
I think the resources are great, and it's appreciated that there's the Grand Rapids, the GRPS University. Some of the things I wanted to touch base on is the students and their mental health, especially because of the pandemic that we just experienced.
Yeah.
I know that kind of impacted everybody, but specifically with the students, have you seen any changes within their behavior throughout the years?
I think so. I think that, and by the way, we were already behind the ball in regards to addressing mental health issues in the public schools before the pandemic. And so I don't want us to use the pandemic as an excuse. I think that we need to recognize that it shines such a bright light on that issue that now we're trying to scatter and figure out what we're doing. We saw a lot of kids that were already isolated. They were already feeling alone before the pandemic, and now this isolation of the pandemic heightened that. I think one of the things that we're facing is that in the public schools, particularly middle school and into high school, we have about a 250, 300 to 1 ratio of a counselor to a student. And those counselors, even though they have their master's degree in mental health education, and I got one, I have a master's degree in counseling from Western Michigan University. And that degree has afforded me not only to be K-12 ready, high school through college ready to be able to do counseling, guidance counseling, the academic counseling that's needed, but I'm also a professional counselor, meaning that I know how to assess students in their mental health capabilities or lack thereof. And we don't use that enough. Most of our counselors are used on the academic side. And because we don't put enough resources into the mental health aspects of our high schools, we're seeing that if a counselor has 300 students that they have to do their academic preparation for, the scheduling and all those kinds of things, they have very little time to actually do the kinds of either group or even interventions that might happen, even at a class level. Let's say that I'm a math teacher or social study teacher, and I want you as a counselor to come in my class and teach about a certain aspect to their mental health. That's very much lacking. I don't believe that we do that in our high schools. And so we have to, and through ESSER, we've gotten millions of dollars. And as Whitner has said, towards some of the mental health issues. And I want to see us be more relevant, but also show this is how we are investing in the mental health issues. And we're not quite doing enough of that.
Okay. And then along with mental health, it kind of goes with school safety. I kind of correlate that just because of the critical times that we have been living in the past few years, the tragedies that we have seen. It all goes down to mental health and how that specific student was feeling or has been feeling.
Yeah.
So speaking of school safety, as trustee, how have you and how would you kind of come about that?
So again, as I can draw on my experience both in mental health, working in the community. I'm a professional counselor in the community as well, and then as a community school coordinator, I had the privilege of wearing that dual hat. I think that with school safety, GRPS has put a lot of money into making sure that, for example, in all of our entrances, you have to be buzzed in. There is a camera where the secretary, if you will, has a bird's eye view of who's coming into the building, and then several barriers to that. That's a good thing. I think that's one that can keep us in school safety. In fact, recently we had a situation in one of our high schools that a person came in, and wisely enough, the secretary was able to say there's something wrong here and kept that person from going further. So that was an excellent use of their training, noticing things that are not right and then doing something about it. We certainly have school officers, and I know that we have a lot of debates. Some people say, we don't want police in our school buildings and so forth, but they're safety officers. And if you don't know anything about GRPS, they teach their safety officers how to build relationships with students. And oftentimes those very same safety officers are so student focused in their work. Obviously they're there to keep the total school safety and in regards to staff too, but they also have a relationship with these kids when they're struggling. Oftentimes that safety officer is one that they can draw on. Hey, can you talk to so and so? So that's another reality that we need to look as multifaceted. So yes, they're there for our safety, but they're also there to build relationships and to give that right perspective of what, if you will, a safety officer. And our safety officers are probably almost qualified to be police officers. I mean, that's the kind of training that they're getting. To me, that's a positive in regards to how we do that. The other thing is that our schools do practice safety, meaning that if we have active shooters, I know that I have to do that with the youth that I work in. One of the trainings that I do is I show a video on, in active safety, what do you do? Well, first of all, you run. If you can't do that, you hide. And if you can't do that, then you fight. You prepare yourself, or that teacher prepares himself if that intruder is going to come in to do something about that. So those are things that we need to, especially as you're alluding to, in our day and age. We have a lot of conversations about gun control and those kinds of things. And if a person is going to do that, they're going to do it. They're going to find a way to do it. But in terms of our schools, we need to be wise enough to be able to train our people so that in that moment they're not going to freeze, and that's a term that we use in counseling. We're either going to fight, we're going to freeze, or we're going to be paralyzed. And so we need, through rote training and going over, to know how to respond in those circumstances so that we can think in the moment.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you speak about the relationship that security officers have with the students, because as a GRPS alumni, I have seen that. So I do agree with you. I do think that they're not just there for our safety, but they're also there for building relationships. And I've seen sometimes that students do go to the security officers because they feel like they're their friend, so they kind of express to them, and then that's how that issue gets more assistance.
Yeah.
So I think I personally think it's great that there are security officers. I think it's another step for security. But speaking of that, have there been any scares of security officers? Have you guys struggled to get more, or is there plans of putting more officers?
Yeah, I mean, like every other school district, shortages are felt all across the board.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that as a board, we have to work at how do we make these finances available. It takes an enormous amount of resources to fund our schools. I mean, from obviously hiring our teachers, custodians, and so forth, including security. And so it takes an enormous amount of resources. And again, unlike many other countries, our taxes pay for those resources. And so a reflection of our society is how much resources we attribute to educating our kids and to preparing them. Why? Because we want to be the best nation in the world. We want to prepare the best citizens to contribute. And I think that we lose focus of that. What is the purpose of public school? It's to prepare our students to be the best citizens and to take their part in our society, whatever that might be. From the lowliest, to the most prominent of us, to have their part. And for us to think that we don't have a part in our society is really sad, that we don't have our part. Now, it may not seem that way, but we do contribute, even when we look at our taxes. And I say to even my students, I shouldn't say students, but the kids that I work with, eventually you're going to work. Your taxes are paying for the teachers that are in front of you. So think about that. Now, don't go to school and tell them, hey, I'm paying for your, now you can say that, I'm paying for your salary. But in that sense, I want something then in return for that. I want to be educated. I want to know my stuff so that I can go out there and then do my thing and contribute to the greatness of our country.
Okay, that's an interesting standpoint. I think parents are becoming more involved, and
Oh yeah.
I have seen the difference too. I think it's just as generations keep growing, their involvement is becoming greater. I just speak from my personal standpoint too. My parents couldn't really be there involved because they had to work all the time. So, yeah, and then just the resources as well. The resources are being provided now compared to many years back. I think there has been a great increase in that. So, but like you mentioned, it all comes down to the funding as well. So,
Yeah, you're correct. More than ever before, I think we're seeing before our very eyes some cultural shifts, and parents are rightly concerned in terms of what are the schools teaching our children. I believe that it is a partnership. I don't know if do you have kids or no?
No, I don't.
But parents entrust their kids to us. And we're an extension of not only their family, but their values too. And so we have to make sure that our values are aligning with our constituents. And if the majority of our constituents believe certain things, then we as a school district need to take that into account. And then inform parents on this is what we're teaching on, this is what we're expanding on. And if parents want to withhold or want a conversation or want an opportunity to inform their kid, hey, your school is going to teach this. This is what we believe about that, or this is our perspective on that, and so that it is a partnership. And then the school ought to welcome that. If there's differences, rather than saying no, that's not your place. We're the professionals. You leave it to us. No, it's a partnership, because they are going to influence that next generation. I mean, they're spending 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, for some 12 years. That's a significant amount of training that goes on. And so we need to take that seriously. And I want to encourage the parents out there to get further involved. We have PALs, parent action leaders in our schools. That's designed to have parents have an input in their specific school and how they want it run, how they want resources to be spent. And so that's one way to do it. Certainly, texting and calling and giving their input to the principal is another way for parents to air their concerns or even their, yeah, you're doing a great job, keep on doing it, because they need to hear that. And what I have found is that most of our principals, if not all, are receptive. They want to know what the parents think, and they want to take into consideration. And so are our teachers as well.
Yeah, and sometimes either a good or a bad type of feedback is still the best thing that they can get, because if there's no feedback at all, then they don't know what they have to work on. So
they're going to continue to do it until they realize it's happened, and then they respond.
Yeah.
And so yeah, you're right. We need rather to be proactive than reactive.
So switching shifts, if you were to be re-elected, what are some of the things that you would probably propose or do differently compared to the years that you have already served?
Man, that's an awesome question. I think certainly having nearly 10 years of experience coming into this re-election cycle, I've had and then having put 4 kids and seeing the result of the effects of their schooling on what they are as adults. Some of it is a concern. Most of it is they got a good education. They're all college graduates and going further. I was the first one of 16 to get my bachelor's degree out of 16 brothers and sisters. And so, and now my kids have all graduated. I think my parents in that generation turned it around in me and my brothers and sisters. They all graduated high school. I would say that I want to continue to see an emphasis on teacher pay. And I have to say, even though the MEA did not support me, I have always supported teacher and teacher pay increases, and for us to reflect that value that we have in our teachers. Again, they are teaching more than just academics. They're teaching them how to be persons. They're teaching them how to reconcile relationships. They're doing a lot of things that we sometimes might see as gray areas, but they're learning that in a social context in our schools. So that's a real important piece for me. Certainly, our facilities, we have been losing students. We lost something like 30% due to COVID, and so that reflects our bottom line. If we have 3,000 less students, you times that by 8,700. That's a lot of money that we could use for resources that we now don't have. And so that's a concern. We have to start attracting families back rather than them leaving because of either the lack of academics or what their perceived of safety is, or certainly what the schools are teaching. Some families leave our schools because of what we're teaching, not so much of the academics, but other areas. And so we need to be responsive in that way. I think that if I have the privilege of representing, our community again, I think bilingual education is another one. We have Southwest as a dual enrollment, and then typically we have this perspective that we teach from K through 3rd grade into learning English, and we know that being bilingual, whatever that language is a plus. It's not a minus. We have many of our people that can speak 3 or 4 or 5 languages, and companies are using that. I recently had a person that was going to be a flight attendant, and they said no because that person wasn't bilingual. They were looking for people that know more than one language because they need to be able to utilize them in these other areas. And so I think that we need to continue to offer those kinds of pieces in our school. I want us to be not just emphasizing the college readiness and certainly working in the workforce, welders and mechanics and stuff, but I want us to emphasize college readiness. To me, that also includes the workforce as well. So that's another area that for me I want to continue to emphasize. I want more parent engagement. Parents, listen, you need to become involved. And I know that many of you work, 2 or 3 jobs or long hours, but start communicating, texting, start doing it, videos, whatever you need to do to communicate. your needs and concerns, please do that. We need more parent engagement and involvement in our schools.
Okay, I think those are all great issues. I think they're all great proposals that you're mentioning. I think it's needed. So, yeah, if you do seek re-election, or you are seeking re-election, but if you do get re-elected, I think that you would probably kind of continue doing what you have been doing and kind of pushing further. So I think it's a great option. And just one last question is, why do you believe that the community should vote for you for another term?
Well, I hope that I've demonstrated that I have tried to be responsive to the community needs, to their voice, whether, for example, we have committees that we serve in, the academic committee, the finance committee, the city liaison committee. And what that means is that there's 9 voices, and I'm one of those 9. And so when I speak on issues, a variety of different issues, it takes an enormous amount of time aside from the Monday meeting that you see, us public meetings that we have. We have several other meetings during the month that we go to, and a stack of papers that we have to become educated on. I mean, we have a finance of hundreds of millions of dollars, and sifting through the details of that for the schools that we represent is an enormous amount of work, and we have to become educated, become semi-experts in those areas. The 9 years that I've had as preparation for that, I think are going to help me to know what the issues are, and it takes at least several years to really get a sense of the flow of not only the meetings, but then all of the details that go into that. And so I think I bring that experience. I'm certainly bilingual. I represent not just obviously the Hispanic, that's a passion, and me as a person, but also the conglomerate of cultures. I mean, we have, over 30 cultures that we represent, languages that are spoken through our school. That's an enormous amount of responsibility to have in preparation for, the workforce that they're going to be doing. You're one of our graduates, and it's good to see that you're getting your education and going forward and hopefully coming back and giving back to the community. So.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for your time, and we wish you the best of luck on this re-election. We're just days away, so we wish you the best of luck.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and as another thing I just wanted to mention is that you do have the experience. You've been there for almost 10 years, so probably keeping you there for a little bit longer, I think that would be kind of great.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, so if you want to learn more about Jhon, you can visit his Facebook page at Jhon Matias for GRPS Board of Education. You can't register to vote online anymore, but you can do so by visiting your clerk's office in person. You can do that up to the day of Election Day, which takes place on Tuesday, November 8th. We're just days away, so if you want to vote before, you can go ahead and do so by visiting your clerk's office. To see your ballot or to see if you are registered, you can visit michigan.gov/vote. For more interviews in English and Spanish, you can visit vocerous.com, our YouTube page at Vocero Hispano TV, and our Facebook page, Vocero Hispano.